Hello, changemaker.
Welcome to the Innovation Room.
A place for business leaders,
Change agents and change champions.
anyone who wants to know where digital transformation is taking us,
A place that sparks ideas.
and explores what's really possible with software and technology.
Ready?
Let's see what's happening.
Welcome to the Cutting Edge series, AI Return on Change. I'm your host, Lindsay Jessup, eager to take you on an enlightening journey in this episode titled A Recipe for Change. Today, we're delighted to be in conversation with the eminent Lee Kingshott, Chief Technology Officer at PAM Group. Lee brings a wealth of experience from organizations with disparate or non-existent technical strategies and masterfully steers them to a place of cohesion and productivity. But Lee's passion isn't just confined to aligning technical strategy with business plans. It extends to living and delivering on an explorer mindset. Taking inspiration from the heroic deeds of Ernest Shackleton, today's conversation is a deep dive into a recipe for change. We'll be peeling back the layers and secret ingredients to digital evolution, the power of communication and leadership centered on trust. Moreover, we'll delve into the transformative impact of AI in the healthcare industry, a topic that's rapidly gaining momentum. So are you ready to become a master chef in empowerment? Then let's jump right in as we explore the exciting and ever-evolving world of change management in the age of AI. Let's delve into the potential it holds for all of us. Don't just stand on the sidelines, it's time to harness and adapt the return on change. So thank you for joining us in the Innovation Room, Lee.
You're very welcome.
Oh, thank you. Could you take a moment? I know you quite well, but for the benefit of our audience, could you introduce yourself?
Of course. So my name is Lee Kingshott. I am currently the Chief Technology Officer for a company called PAM Group, which is a UK-wide occupational health and wellbeing provider that's been pretty well established for about 17, 18 years. But my background is quite long and varied. So I think my first board level position was in the late 1990s, so a century ago. And I've worked in all different sorts of industries, lots of financial services. So I think I've worked for about 3 major UK banks. I've worked in software development industry, defence, law enforcement, local government, at the NHS for a period of time. So lots and lots of broad experience, I guess. And my sort of, I guess my forte, I would say, is going into organizations that have either a really disjointed technical strategy or no technical strategy, or a technical strategy that's not delivering, and they need someone to come in and resolve that. So I spend a lot of time in organizations for the first year or so, really creating a technical strategy that is aligned to the business plan, and then essentially seeing that through. And that typically, in my career since the late 90s, takes anywhere between 2 and 4 years for most organizations.
Yeah, and well, that was a great summary, and I think that'll show exactly why I think you're the perfect person to have on this podcast because I've had the privilege of, I think it's been what, at least 5 to 7 years now we've worked together in different forms,
It's
and
been a while, yeah.
I've had the privilege of seeing that digital evolution in action and your approach to going in and addressing some of the key challenges, which arguably even go beyond the technical. And often they think CTOs or CIOs are heavily involved in the technical, but I love your views on the people and culture components as well. But before we dig in, um, who you might have seen or heard, but we'd like to start off by saying if you were in the innovation room, that creative space, and you could invite
Yeah.
anyone, alive or dead, to join you in that innovation room, who would
Ooh,
you bring?
really
Or in
easy
this
for
room with
me.
us today? Who's that?
Uh, it would be Ernest Shackleton.
Ooh, explore.
And so the reason I say that for is you probably know his background. He was an Arctic or Antarctic, Arctic and Antarctic explorer, but his greatest achievement really was born out of complete disaster, which is their ship got crushed in the ice. They all had to abandon their ship on the ice pack and navigate through pretty stormy, horrible seas with no map, no compass, in open boats across hundreds of miles of sea and ice to Elephant Islands, which is just off of the Antarctic coast. And he got all his men there safely. He then kept them all alive. He had to keep the morale up. He had to keep discipline. He then sets out in a converted open boat across 800 miles of open sea, again without a compass or a map, to land in the Falkland Islands. He unfortunately landed the wrong side of the Falkland Islands from where the whaling station was, and coincidentally, as a result of that, then became the first group of people, as him and three others, I think, who then climbed those mountains in essentially shoes, really, with some nails they had taken out of the boat to hammer through to make into spikes. They climbed those mountains, first people ever to do that, turned up in the whaling station looking quite dishevelled, as you can imagine. And his first impulse was to go back and rescue the people that he'd left on Elephant Island. And when he finally got to do that, when the weather permitted that, and they got back there, every single person was still alive. So that's a monumental feat against the elements, against overwhelming challenges that would absolutely see most of us fail. He managed to keep all those people alive, motivated, etc. So yeah, I think for me, anyone that can motivate a team of individuals to get through something like that is pretty amazing.
Wow, I did not know that. So you have me captivated with that one. I love that's one of my favorite questions because everyone draws inspiration from so many different places, from so many different reasons. And you kind of touched on something I've always been curious about. And it's a slight tangent, but I think it's along the same lines of the conversation today when we talk about people and culture and everything. How much do you think like an explorer mindset is important in the space of creativity and problem solving?
I think it's absolutely at the heart of it. Whether people realise it or don't realise it, it is absolutely at the heart of it. And certainly in the role that I do, I think it's a combination of always asking that question of why, always asking why can't you do that, always being able to look at out of the box solutions and alternatives that wouldn't ordinarily spring to mind, and doing all of that at the same time as keeping a team of individuals or a company coming along on that journey with you. So all of those same things apply. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's very, very relevant. Very relevant.
Yeah. I think that Ernest Shackleton example is going to stick with me actually because I think that that's a perfect story to kind of a compelling tale, if you will. Um, so tell us a bit more about your journey with PAM Group in particular.
Okay, so I joined PAM Group in November 21, so almost 2 years ago. I think it's almost 2 years ago.
Mm.
Is it 20 or 21? Might have even been 20, a long time ago, a few years ago. And it's a business that has, by its own admission, underinvested in technology for quite some time. It's a very typical owner-managed large SME that has suddenly realised it's getting to the top end of large SMEs now, and it needed a bit more of a corporate governance around the board and strategy and specifically technology. So I was brought on board alongside a CFO and a people director to broaden the capability of the board. Um, and I guess my first, as I mentioned previously, my first sort of task was to evaluate what we've got, work out where the business wanted to go, and then try and map out a technology plan that would enable us to get there. I think the unique thing about PAM Group I guess, well, not necessarily the unique thing about PAM Group, but the unique thing about organizations in that space of that size with that background is that they are incredibly agile. And when I say incredibly agile, I mean agile, sometimes verging on chaotic, but very agile, very, very fleet of foot. And therefore, any plan that we came up with, or I came up with, it became one of the key elements for that was the ability to keep changing tack, keep changing approach, keep changing priorities. And that was a real key element of anything that we sort of worked on.
I mean, it sounds. I guess I have the firsthand experience of seeing how adaptive, and how much of you leaned into your strength of being able to do that, and we love to call that a spry strategy, which a lot of businesses struggle with, not just from a um, a people point of view, but also a leadership point of view. So it's been great to see that in all levels how that's been helping. But in particular, how have you seen that help the evolution of occupational health and its advancements?
So I think occupational health is, there are lots of similar industries, I would say, in the UK around healthcare generally, which have not leveraged technology to the same degree as other industry sectors. So if you look at dentistry, which is also another area that I've got some experience in, you look at occupational health, you look at what the NHS is doing, they are typically slow adopters for technology, and with good reason in some instances, because at the end of, if you make a financial mistake in a financial, make a mistake in a financial system, okay, you might get the decimal place in the wrong place, and that might cause issues, but no one's going to die over that. You get something wrong in the healthcare space, then potentially you impact on people's well-being and health. So the risks are much higher. So it's understandable to a degree that they're a slightly slower adopter of technology. But I think it's quite interesting if you look at PAM Group specifically and how they have adapted to occupational health delivery. Occupational health 20 years ago was very much founded on GP provision. So a GP was at the heart of the service that was delivered. And when the CEO of PAM Group created PAM, his view was very much, no, let's not do that. Let's use occupational health practitioners, and let's use them backed by a lot of technology to deliver a safe and competent service in a slightly different way. It had a different cost model, it had a different delivery channel, and it did change the marketplace. And now, 20 years later, if you look around the UK occupational health market, almost everyone is delivering it in that way. There are a few exceptions. There are a few businesses that we come across that still have a GP at the centre, but they have much, much higher cost bases. So I think 20 years ago, there was a view, change the model, use technology to help drive that. I think what's happened over the last 15 years probably is that investment in technology just hasn't been repeated, it hasn't been sustained. And as a result, that technology is now becoming quite difficult to manage, difficult to scale, difficult to build upon and enhance. So I think those are the key things, really. I think from a technology point of view, trying to adapt the model, trying to deliver the services in a way that's more 21st century, is the battle, is what we're trying to achieve here. And actually, going on, I think one of the other topics we wanted just to briefly talk about was COVID and how COVID impacted the occupational health industry. It was a game changer for lots and lots and lots of reasons. All of a sudden, and this is not just an occupational health industry point, it's a general point. All of a sudden, middle management in the UK was faced with having to get their employees to work from home. And again, if you went back 10 years ago, that would have been a very middle managers would have been very anti that. They'd have been very distrustful of their staff working from home. And all of a sudden they were forced to do it. We were very lucky that the technology we had built our core applications on enabled us to just send people home with laptops, and they could carry on and they could deliver their service, be that mental health counselling or occupational health services or even physiotherapy. We could deliver those things remotely using technology. So we were in a very good place. What's interesting is post-pandemic, that's changed the whole way that service is now delivered. So although there is a little bit of a swing back to face-to-face and people coming to clinics, it's by no means as busy as it used to be. The predominance still is probably 80% remote.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you touched on a few really important, I would say, challenges that I hear a lot of our audience meet up with. So you started with talking about the legacy systems and built on big vision and big investment, and the ultimate return on investment powered by joining up a really good business strategy with a really strong technology strategy. And along that journey, sometimes people might go off on the wrong direction. Um and um obviously then you pair that with what's happening in the market. Obviously COVID not only is going to make something like it tests your business resiliency and how powerful technology could be from that point of view, but it's also really interesting. I think you kind of have a double strength there, which is that your space is health and well-being. So I'd imagine that that had a really interesting impact on the services you offer and the opportunities you could capture both with technology. So before we explore that a little bit more, I wanted to put what I think is a really big question, but I think it's something that um, will be very useful to people that are trying to propel their digital evolution, which is, what do you think the secret ingredient is for any digital transformation project? So if you were to make a recipe and there's one thing you wouldn't leave out and you think is the most
Yeah.
important, what would that be? And what would your advice be for our audience that are embarking on this journey?
So I think the big issue in a transformation program is always people. It's never the technology. Technology,
Mhm.
finding the right partner, finding the right tech stack, finding the right individual bit of technology is relatively easy. If you know what you're doing, it's relatively easy.
Mhm.
I think the biggest issue is people and getting people educated and communicated to. And I'm a big fan of Walt Disney, not just because of the cartoons and the films that they make, but because of something that Walt Disney is possibly misquoted for saying, but possibly did say, which is, you have to tell people things 3 times. You tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them, and then you remind them. And I think when it comes to transformation projects, you've got to do that with the people impacted. You have to do things at least 3 times. And I think one of the things that is often left to the sidelines, or it's done as a bit of an afterthought, is we've got to go and communicate with the users. We've got to bring them in. We've got to make sure they understand the change and they're part of the change. And we've got to communicate all of that. And when you're doing that to individuals that already have a day job and you're expecting them to do this on top of their day job, that becomes really difficult. So the people management piece is the key for any transformation project program, as far as I'm aware. And I think the big ingredient, if you're looking for one magic ingredient, it is that communications piece.
Mm. And communications, and I like that you said the repeat 3 times. I think that that's really powerful. I would take that away definitely. So if you pull out a secret ingredient, it's communication and the fact that they need to hear it and consume it, and I imagine in different ways as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so
So.
being able to take a technical, I mean, we had a very good example of that actually. We had
Mhm.
to implement multi-factor authentication across the group, and clinicians are a really interesting bunch of end users, in as much as clinically, obviously they know what they're doing. It's a different world, the clinical world. Technically, they're probably not the most technically literate people on the planet, and trying to get them to understand why you're doing MFA for and how they need to use it and why it's important is a really was a difficult challenge. And you have to translate that into bite-sized chunks of information and communicate it to different audiences in different ways, because they all consume it in different ways. So, for example, if you're dealing with anyone under about 30 who will be used to using a banking app on their mobile phone, it's very passé. You hardly have to tell them anything other than we're doing it. If you were to take people in the age group 50 plus, it's different. You've got to be very, very explicit. You've got to have a very short user guide. You've got to use lots of pictures. So yeah, communication is really, really critical to any
Wow.
transformation program.
I love that. That was a really helpful example too, because I know a lot of people, especially when they get into launching or enhancing products, carrying that communication all the way through can be maybe sometimes an afterthought. It's usually when you
Yeah,
see so bringing that to the top of the agenda and having examples of how to do that as part of the change management piece is a really great tip. So, if we explore that a little bit more, we know that people are fundamental to the success of basically implementing these big changes or technological advancements in business. So, what do you believe in your industry in particular is the biggest shift regard to this realization?
um, I think it's probably two things. I think there's a recognition. It's almost stating the blindingly obvious, really. Um, there's a demographic shift, I think, in the types of individuals that we are treating. So, um, what's really interesting is we know this because we've implemented a data lake within PAM Group, and we're using technology now to look at statistical information across all of our clients. So we support about 1.5 million employees that are employed by 1,500 large corporate bodies across the UK. And what we can see is two things. We can see that there is an increase in the use of what we call employee assistance programs, and specifically mental health counselling and support. There's a general increase in that, but that increase typically is in the younger demographic. So you see more and more people in under 30s looking for that sort of support. We can also see through use of technology, we can see that there's a demographic at the other end of the age group spectrum, which is making more and more use of occupational health services and physiotherapy services. So it is quite interesting to look at the data and slice and dice it in that way. I think so. I think having recognised that, and recognised that we've used technology to understand that, we can now tailor our services and our products, and manage our workforce more effectively, because we know that those are two pockets that are driving large volumes of business and large volumes of demand on our service. So I think the data element is a big key point. And I think that was a bit of a foot in the door as far as the board was concerned, because suddenly they could see real tangible benefit from having that sort of technology. Trying to describe to someone in a board why you want to create a data lake for is a really difficult thing, because why would you want to do that? Well, there's lots of things you could do with it, but what are the real business tangible benefits that you're going to drive from that? This was a really great example. And off the back of that, we've now been able to start investing in technologies like DigiCare, for example, our health surveillance application, because we know that that technology will bolt into those sorts of growth areas within our business.
That hits a really important point. So one of the things that we talk about with our clients that are might be even new to some concepts in a robust strategy around digital evolution is being able to really link, not just gut instinct link, which I think a lot of us, and we shouldn't undermine that. Experience does have a big part to play, but we talk about evergreen investment. So no longer are we in a world where you can just do and I think your story at the beginning is a powerful one as well. We aren't in a world where you can invest once and see return
No,
off that for
no.
decades to come. We're seeing exponential growth in the way that technology and businesses are advancing, which means you need to be really intentional of how what you're investing in and how you can get that return on investment to smartly continually
Yeah,
advance your business. And I think that's a powerful example of how you can do that in a very smart way, which is harnessing the power of data and the knowledge that you have about your business. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. One thought that came to mind as well, when you were talking about COVID and how much employee well-being has been brought to the forefront of every business. Both, I'd imagine it's kind of both sides for you, both in taking care of your team, but also the flip side is the services you're offering. Um, Something that struck me is. We talk a lot about, and it links into the people piece as well. The big challenge is when businesses are changing as quickly, and you talked about how agile the team is, and the
mhm.
strategy, like at the top even, will be changing quite quickly to meet the needs of the market. um, that means what you had is no longer, and where you'll be, you're not
Yeah,
there. So we describe that as a liminal space. A liminal space's culture means that you have a team capable of handling that chaos, a little bit of fog, and you know ultimately, I think you can have people that are really, really resilient and capable of navigating that and bringing clarity and support. But arguably that comes at a cost, which for some people could be well-being. So in this kind of innovative space, I wonder if you have any thoughts or views on um, if you think you see well-being and businesses investing in well-being to help navigate this technology advancement, or basically just any insight on that.
yeah. I think you're absolutely right. It There are lots of organisations in different market sectors that fit the same business mould of PAM Group, in as much as they've got very much an owner managed feel about them. They are very much agile, stroke chaotic. They are in a very heavy growth sector, a sector that is growing very very quickly, with lots of competition, and as a result, you end up with people that are burning the candle at both ends for sure. And we've been doing that for a couple of years now. And you always sit there and think, well, next year it'll be better, but of course it's not, because it's a cultural thing. And I think lots of organisations recognise that, and they invest through us very heavily in well-being, um, to try and ensure that those individuals don't end up falling off the edge of a cliff somewhere, and that there is a reasonable life work balance. I think what's interesting, and what is a challenge for people like me and managers generally within organizations like us, is how do you still focus on delivering, which is what the board want you to do, um, and and at the same time ensure that your staff don't end up having to take a month off through stress. Um, and it is a fine balancing act, and I think it's, again, if there was a magic ingredient, if that you could work that out, if you could work out what that was, and bottle it, you wouldn't be doing this podcast now. You'd be off on a desert island somewhere enjoying yourself. It's a real difficult thing to do. It's a really difficult balancing act, and I think part of part of ensuring you can navigate that is ensuring that when you recruit, you find the right people, and that is far less around technical skill set, because as I said, you can buy technical skill set. That's why we work with people like Geeks. What you can't buy is the mentality of an individual, the way that they approach things, the way that they communicate, the way that they deal with stress. That's a really difficult thing to try and find. And then when you found them, you've got to look after them. And in other organizations, you will be very well aware of this because it's an application you've helped us to develop. But we spend a huge amount of time producing content and delivering content to people around how to manage stress, how to eat healthily, how to lose weight, how to keep fit, how to manage your financial stresses, emotional stresses, and the support around all of that is what we do as a business. And yes, you're right. We do offer that to our own staff. That's a key part of working for PAM Group.
And I might be stating the obvious here, but I think in the time that we're in, and how quickly things are happening and changing, I guess listening to what you're saying, I think we both probably feel the same things coming at it, from our businesses and what we're seeing, that without that well-being being also at the top of the agenda in terms of a business strategy, it would be very challenging to get the results, to be able to be as agile as you need to be able to deliver. And I think that's really interesting. I hosted another podcast recently, which will be going out shortly, and it was also about leading with trust, and that sort of resonated with me, about how power and control is no longer the way of getting results, and how you see leadership changing in globally as a concept, and it's based on some different principles. And I think that sort of resonates with me, how we can do that, empower the team, and as you say, deliver the results
Yeah.
that's expected. And maybe that's one for us to take away and ponder, Lee. Let's work up a secret recipe to unlock that, and I think we'll be on to something. So
I
I
must
can't.
admit, I'm a very big fan. Just on that last point, I think
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. How do you empower? And that's a key word, I guess, isn't it?
Mm,
How do you empower the people that work for you to do what they do best? And I think I've always said to my team, I'm not going to tell you how to go and deliver something. I'm going to come to you with a problem. I understand the technology and what the technology can and can't do, but here's a problem. Come back to me with a solution. I don't mind how you do that. I don't mind which flavor of a solution you come back with, but I want you to problem solve that. And as I said a few minutes ago, picking the people with the right sort of mental attitude to approach things in that way is really, really important. And a part of that is not being afraid to always ask that question, which is why? Why are you doing things like that? Why do we do things in that way? Why is that process like it is? And quite often when you ask people that in an organization, you'll always get the answer back, well, quite often get the answer back, because we've always done it like that. So that's a really important question for those people that you're empowering to go and ask when they're trying to solution something, is to ask the business, why do you do things like that? Ask your customers, why is it you want it like that?
yeah. Very powerful question. And my brain can't help but also go to psychological safety. So
Mm.
how safe do you to be able to problem solve and ask those questions, which sometimes even asking a why might be difficult for some people.
Oh,
And I
look,
think,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Because it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because if you can feel that if you ask the question why, you're going to look stupid, or you're going to look like you don't understand. An actual fact, I think it's a very childlike thing to do, and that almost is the best way to approach fact finding when you're trying to solution, is to approach it with a completely blank sheet, don't have any preconceptions, but to just ask, why do you do those things? Why is it like that?
Yeah. No, I think hopefully what I'm hearing through a lot of this is, um, for business leaders, I hope there's a lot of, I'm finding it useful, synthesizing what good leadership looks like in a liminal space, in a big change space. And I think there's some interesting things there along the lines of, you know, being curious, asking
Yeah,
why, creating a space to problem solve, and set the right guardrails, but send them away, come
yeah,
back to you. And even if it's not, understanding that it's going back to that explorer aspect as well. You're bringing the team with you, and if they go get stuck somewhere, you go back
yeah.
and get them. So no, there's
And I
some
think
really
the other thing that fits in with that really well is a development approach, but it has broader impacts than just development. And the development approach is fail fast. So don't be afraid to go and ask the question why. Don't be afraid to try something you could then say, no, that doesn't work. Let me try something else. Though that sort of mentality is a really, finding people that are able to work like that is absolutely key in organizations that are in that transition state.
yeah. I love listening to these examples, and whenever I get to um I consider it such a privilege to be able to work with such, different businesses that have such strong vision around how they can make an impact on the world. So I love when I hear how people are going to harness technology to make the world a better place, arguably. And I'm
Yeah, yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
amazing, how powerful would that be for myself or my team to know in
Yeah.
advance. And there's so much out there to consume in the media, both of good tales and bad tales about, how we can harness technology, and in itself it's not good or bad, it's all how you use it. And I think that that's such a great example of how you could completely turn a business model on its head. And I can only imagine the business strategy behind that and how it'll change, um you know the pricing models, the
Oh,
opportunities, the
it's
everything could be
yeah, it's completely mad. I think if you think
profound.
about um, what we do now, so we work with 1,500 large private sector, public sector organisations with 1.5 million employees. Um, but that's a reactive service, so we're fixing those people when they have a problem, and there's a charge for that. Wouldn't it be great if we had a much smaller charge but worked with everybody who's in employment and provided that sort of analysis service and identified the people that needed some form of education or direction or whatever now? That change, it's a win-win situation because it does change people's lives. It prevents people becoming ill. um, it improves the efficiency and therefore the profitability of those employers. And yes, it would improve our profitability as well. So it is a bit of a win-win-win type situation there, which is rare, I think, in business. It's a rare opportunity where every stakeholder, every part of that sort of food chain benefits
Mhm.
from it.
And just to explore, you mentioned it's definitely part of your strategy that you're advancing. Um, but you also mentioned not quite yet, and landing an emerging technology, or maybe arguably not so emerging now. I guess there's lots of emerging AI technologies, but it's becoming more and more um, common, I guess, in use cases.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
why do you think that it's still a year or two away before you'll start to see that land more in the well-being space and health?
So I think there's a couple of different things there. Can we use AI to do some of that data analytics and projection and modeling? Absolutely. And we can do that now. There's no real downside to doing that because essentially you're just producing a model and some analysis. The other area where we use or would look to use AI is in the applications that we have, like DigiCare, for example. So DigiCare is an application which essentially triages somebody, um, So you could go into DigiCare and say, I don't know, I've got a stomach ache. Now, we would triage you, and we would end up, at the output of that triage is to connect you with the right sort of clinician. So that in that case, it would be a clinical nurse. Or if you said, I've hurt my wrist, we might put you in contact with a physiotherapist. Or if you were to say, I'm not feeling, I'm feeling a bit depressed today, then we'd put you in contact with a mental health counsellor. So DigiCare is using technology to put you in contact with the right clinical resource. So you as a person would turn up to use DigiCare. You don't need to know what is the right type of clinical resource for you to speak to. You don't need to know what your problem really is, and therefore who is the best person to help you deal with it. You simply explain what how you're feeling and what your problem is. I've hurt my wrist or what have you. And we use technology to put you in contact with that right person. That's a different story from saying, actually, we'll use AI to come up with a clinical diagnosis for you. So in other words, if you said, I hurt my wrist, it would be quite a leap. Let's say you hurt your wrist because you were about to jump off of a bridge. So actually, the fundamental issue here is you've got a mental health problem. You've got a mental health crisis. It's not that you've hurt your wrist. So would we use AI to make that connection and that diagnosis, and therefore put you through with the urgency you need to be put through to speak to a mental health counsellor? That's a few years off yet. The ability to be able to do that in a fail-safe mechanism without potentially impacting a person's life in that instance, that's a way off. But can we use it to do that data analytical bit right now? Absolutely, we can. Can we use it to enhance that initial triage to get you in front of a person? Yes, we definitely can. Can we use it to do that full end-to-end diagnosis and give you the treatment plan at the end? I think we're a little way off of that yet. And I think on top of that, there is actually a moral question as to whether we should do that or not.
Well, that leads me in nicely to the next question I wanted to explore with you, and this will be the last one to explore in this episode of the Innovation Room. But I wanted to understand, what do you believe is your responsibility in implementing AI technologies for occupational health integration, given all of moral dilemmas that we were talking about, and the humans and technology living in
Yeah.
harmony?
So I think that's a really interesting question. I think that my responsibility is to point out those things to the board, to ensure that the board have a full and fair analysis of the pros and the cons. Thankfully, the board that I work with have that, and they fully understand that the risks that could be inherent in implementing AI in an end-to-end solution like that. And they are also, because it's an industry which is healthcare related, they are slightly risk adverse, which is a good thing in the healthcare industry. I guess my concern would be where you get a new startup organization that is tech driven rather than healthcare driven, that happens to work in the healthcare industry, who might think, yeah, this is a great idea, we'll just use AI to come up with the end diagnosis. I think that's fraught with danger, that's fraught with problems. And I think one of the challenges that we may face in the coming couple of years is exactly that. New startups entering the market that have come from a technology background, not a healthcare background, maybe don't have some of the governance structures that we have in place, maybe don't have some of the clinical expertise that we have, and approach it purely from a technology AI perspective. And it only takes a large corporate to say, yeah, that's a great idea, I'm going to go and do that because it's way cheaper. And then all of a sudden the world's a bit of a different place, isn't it?
Yeah. And I guess that's kind of exploring, you hear a lot about people saying, should we slow down on AI? Should we,
Yeah.
and arguably, arguably, at least my opinion on the matter is you can't. It's happening.
No.
So
Yeah.
it's about how, not do we or don't we, but how do we in the right way. And
Look, I completely agree. That's exactly the right question. I think people are asking the wrong question, which is, should we slow down? Should we not slow down? That horse is bolted. It's too late now. The question really should be, what is it ethically and morally correct to use this technology for, and where should the boundaries be drawn? That's the question that should be being asked.
Well, it sounds like we've found a few different big ticket items that if we solve these problems, including that one, we'll be on to something, Lee.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I genuinely feel really privileged that I get to work with yourself and PAM Group, and I really believe in the work that you guys are doing. Thank you so much for joining us, and we can wrap up there.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for joining us in the Innovation Room.
We hope it sparks some ideas.
Want to learn more about what we do?
Maybe you could even be our next guest.
And spark some ideas yourself.
Find us at Geeks Limited.
And join us again soon.
Because real change never stops.